Recently, a man burned down his place of employment while saying,
All you had to do was pay us enough to live. All you had to do was pay us enough to
Yep.
live.
It is that simple, dude.
this is what the government wants, but inflation is caused by money printing and deficit spending, and wages don't keep up with inflation. The government loves it because they know we're too stupid to blame Congress. We'll blame businesses. Also recently, Kamala Harris was asked what causes inflation and what she's going to do about it.
All right, thank you. Well, let's start with this. Prices have gone up.
Inflation is a tax. The reason that governments like inflation is because it allows governments to spend more money without raising taxes. And that way, we blame businesses for inflation, not the government for irresponsible spending. Spending money they don't have by printing more. In this video, we'll give you an oversimplified version of why inflation is actually a secret tax. Now, there are many more reasons than we explain in this video, but this should be enough to get one foot in the rabbit hole. I often use diamonds as an analogy to explain dollars. Diamonds have a certain value because there are companies that would have us believe that there's a limited supply. Just to keep it simple, imagine that it would take an amount of diamonds that would fit into the palm of your hand to buy a house. But if diamonds were everywhere, they were popping out of sewer caps, you could find them on the beach and so on, it would take a truckload of diamonds to buy a house. Fewer diamonds in the world means that it takes fewer diamonds to buy something. More diamonds in the world means that it takes more diamonds to buy something. I saw this play out firsthand in real time while day trading cryptocurrencies 8 years ago. Let's say there was a cryptocurrency like Binance that had 1 million Binance coins minted, and one Binance coin was worth $10, just to keep the math simple. When they minted more coins, say 100,000 more, a 10% increase, bringing the total supply of Binance coins to 1.1 million, I would log into my digital crypto wallet and see that my $10 was now worth around $9, or 10% less. Occasionally, Binance would announce a token burn. They would say, we're going to burn 500,000 coins. Burn just means delete. So the supply would go from 1 million to 500,000. They would announce that they're going to delete half of their coins because they knew everyone was going to buy Binance coins, because after half the coins were deleted, the value of each coin next to the US dollar would double. So in this example, Binance deletes half the coins, I would log into my account, and my previous $10 worth of Binance coins would now be worth $20. What is an asset? It's a thing you own. For example, many people think of their house as an asset, or a share of stock, or a piece of land, or a piece of gold. This is why wealth starts with a mindset. The rich don't seek jobs for money. You don't get wealth from a W-2 employment paycheck, unless the job is used to expose you to the social circles in which you know which assets to buy. Social capital is something you'll hear me say a lot. In fact, I'm about to make another video exclusively on the importance of social capital. But this is why people run for Congress. So in a sense, their job does make them wealthy, but not from their paycheck, not from their salary. It's because they get social capital, and that gets them things like insider trading or direct payouts that come to them in the form of speaking engagements, or a company will put them on the books as a consultant. The point is, the wealthy don't seek wealth from a job salary in the form of US dollars. But I digress. So when the government wants to buy something and they don't have the money, they simply change the digits on the computer. That's what people mean when they say money printing. Now, how does this connect to inflation? Inflation is essentially time arbitrage. Now, here's an example that everyone should be able to understand. Let's imagine that laundry detergent is going to go up in cost. Next year, it will cost 20% more. You buy $1,000 of laundry detergent this year and save it for next year. Next year, the same amount of laundry detergent will cost you $1,200. Now, one way to look at this is that you saved $200 by buying it this year. But another way to view this, the way wealthy people would view this, is that you made $200 because you can do this with gold, currency, stocks, land, and so on. So assets are not actually increasing in value. Assets have the same value, but the US dollar loses its value every year. That means that if you're an asset holder, like most members of Congress, inflation is your friend. And time is your friend. Why reduce inflation if you're the asset holder? If stuff gets more expensive every year, that should be good for you if you're the one who owns the stuff. You want inflation. The best case scenario for you is that everything you bought last year goes up 200% in value, not 20%, but you can't guarantee that will happen. You don't control value in that way, but you can guarantee that US dollars go down in value. You can control that US dollars go down in value by printing more money, by voting on more spending. So if you're the government, it's a win-win. You print money to fund your irresponsible spending, and you don't have to raise taxes a single %. It's actually a win-win-win because you spend that money on companies, aka assets, that you own stake in. The value of the US dollar goes down, your net worth goes up, or that money goes to organizations who fund your next campaign. And the cherry on top is that if you're the government, you know that the ordinary person is too ill-informed to understand that the government caused the inflation. So everyone blames businesses for charging more. Some people even blame the workers. I was at the grocery store the other day and I heard this guy saying, everything is so expensive, it's because of the damn kids who want to get paid more. The truth is, costs go up first and wages are typically slower to catch up. Wages certainly don't keep up with inflation. They definitely don't pass inflation, even though it's true that businesses would charge more if minimum wage went up. The problem still usually begins with the government. So the reason $7 an hour isn't enough is because of government-caused inflation, not because businesses are too cheap. I should say that it's not just because businesses are too cheap, because businesses are cheap and should be cheap. I try to cut corners every way that I can in my business, although I do typically overpay people. But here's what I really want everyone to understand. Technology and efficiency actually make things cheaper every year, even if inflation were 0%. The only reason inflation would be 0% while things are getting cheaper every year is because of the government-caused inflation. This could come in the form of regulation, money printing, and just plain market manipulation, which pretty much everybody knows at this point, including Iran, because lots of government-backed businesses capitalize on government-caused business models that come from our genius governments. We'll use TVs as an example. When we all still had large bubble-shaped TVs, the first versions of flat-screen TVs were $10,000. I remember there was this kid on my baseball team whose parents had one. And that one wasn't even as big as this one that I have right now in my living room, which I bought at Walmart for around $300. The reason is because efficiency and the production process makes things cheaper each year. The cost of things should go down every year. Some goods are naturally deflationary. Now the percentage changes depending on which good we're speaking about. But just to keep the math simple, let's say that things should get 10% cheaper every year. So if everything costs the same every year, inflation is actually like 10%. In other words, if the government reports that inflation is now 0%, inflation is actually 10% because things are naturally getting 10% cheaper every year. So the government's 10% inflation balances everything out. So if the government says that inflation is 8% this year, well, it actually means that inflation is 18% because production efficiency is actually pushing down against inflation as inflation is trying to push it back up. And to make matters worse, the way that the government measures inflation is biased in their favor. So it's already higher than what they claim, even aside from the reasons we discussed. Additionally, they suppress actual inflation numbers through government subsidies. I spoke to a farmer once who said that his farming business could not be profitable if it were not for the government. Just growing things and selling them would not be enough to run his business. His business heavily relied on insurance, government grants, and tax breaks. So things should get cheaper every year, but they're getting more expensive every year. So why should you be mad? The reason you should be mad is because inflation is actually a pay cut. The reason I know people don't understand inflation is because they're not mad enough. Now I say that not because I want people to be mad. I say that because I know how mad people would be if their boss came to them every year and said, we're going to give you a 10% pay cut. People would lose their shit. Here's how you know you're being manipulated. Both the left and right are doing the same things. Recently, a man burned down his place of employment while saying, All you had to do was pay us enough to live. And he was celebrated for it.
All you had to do was pay us enough to live. All you had to do was pay us enough to
Yep.
live.
It is that simple, dude. This is what happens when you want capitalism to keep going. I mean, what is he saying wrong? This is the only way to get through to capitalist oligarchs.
This is what the government wants, but inflation is caused by money printing and deficit spending, and wages don't keep up with inflation. The government loves it because they know we're too stupid to blame Congress. We'll blame businesses. It's a win-win-win for the Fed. Plus, the business that was burned down may even profit off of the insurance claim. So this really does nothing for the person who burned down the building. Plus his co-workers who don't make enough to live will now be out of a job for a while or file for temporary unemployment and make $300 a week on that or whatever. Also recently, Kamala Harris was asked what causes inflation and what she's going to do about it.
All right, thank you. Well, let's start with this. Prices have gone up, and families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources. That's about a source of stress for families that is not only economic, but is on a daily level, something that is a heavy weight to carry. So it is something that we take very seriously, very seriously.
Now, she either doesn't know what causes inflation or she's hiding what she knows. See, what I just did there, by the way, is called a false dichotomy. There's usually more than two options, so watch out for my own bias. But based on my Army training as a supposed expert in human behavior, I think her body language is suggesting she doesn't know what causes inflation because she's struggling to think of how to explain it, and then she grasps onto something, and then that thing changes. Whereas if she had planned on being deceitful, she would have started with something like, businesses cause inflation. Now, of course, two things can, and often are, true simultaneously. In this case, crummy employers may not pay enough, and government-caused inflation make wages unlivable. Yeah, but guy will say, yeah, but the government can't just change the digits on the computer, even though they admitted that's exactly what they do. So in order to address yeah, but guy, this is what they say money printing actually is. Number one, the government borrows. We're told that when Congress authorizes spending but doesn't have enough tax revenue to cover it, the government can't just type new digits into its own account. Instead, we're told that the U.S. Treasury has to borrow that money. They do this by issuing U.S. Treasuries, aka bonds, notes. They sell these IOUs to the public, to banks, to corporations, to foreign governments, and so on. They say that the Treasury then spends those dollars into the economy. At this point, no new money has been created. It's just been reshuffled. Step two, the central bank steps in, the Federal Reserve. The actual money printing happens when the Federal Reserve, or the Fed, gets involved. If the Fed wants to inject more money into the economy to stimulate growth, they buy those government bonds back from commercial banks. This is the moment the digital magic happens. To pay the commercial banks for those bonds, the Fed doesn't use existing money. They literally credit the commercial banks' reserve accounts at the Fed with newly created digital dollars. And now the digital ledger. The Fed types new numbers into a computer, increasing a commercial bank's reserves. In exchange, the Fed takes the government bond and sits on it. And step three, the money enters the economy. Then there's direct spending versus quantitative easing, but all that's for another day. One of many reasons that many countries are ditching the dollar and selling their bonds is because they're learning that this isn't exactly true. And because they're learning that the US is printing US dollars at a rate that makes their investment into the US dollar a poor decision. So now you know why you should be mad about inflation. The government is literally stealing from you. Not only are they stealing from you, they're getting richer in the process. Their excuse? You can get richer too. Put money into the stock market and maybe you'll get a few percent. So I make no money on these videos. I just do it because I'm an English teacher who likes to teach things. So thank you for questioning your view on things and opening your mind to a new perspective.
Cardboard box is full of little peepers. Ted and Lex is watching from the sofa cushion. make of these new house guests? Yeah, I went and bought some chickens. My whole world's a little different.